Hello and welcome to Growing in Uncertainty. My name is Tess Miller, and through my seminar and coaching business, Wings Unfolded, I help people who love what they're doing, but they're not sure where it's going. I make these videos in large part for myself, actually, but I'm also hoping that whatever I have to share adds value to your life or helps you in some way. If you're feeling stuck in any area of your life, you've definitely come to the right place, because I'm constantly working on the places in my life where I'm feeling stuck. So my hope is that by sharing what I'm doing in the process of getting unstuck, that we can grow in uncertainty together. So today I'm talking about habits or patterns or ways of being that we engage in, maybe on a daily basis or just on a quite often basis. And these patterns are not necessarily good for us. But I'm not really talking about the kinds of patterns like overeating or spending your money on stuff you shouldn't, although that might relate to this today. These are more of the kinds of patterns of thought or emotion or behavior that you really wish that you could get out of. We can get stuck in these patterns and habits for a variety of reasons. They might be ways of being that have been with us for a really long time. Maybe we learned a certain pattern when we were young, or maybe it's a pattern that we think other people expect us to behave or think or feel a certain way when we engage with them. Or maybe it's because our emotions can get so overwhelming for us that way of reacting is the only way that seems right in the moment. Or maybe we just haven't thought of another way of responding in our life yet. So those patterns and habits that aren't really serving us in our life, they're actually holding us back. Those are what I call the Charlie Brown in the football scenario. If you know Charlie Brown and that whole scene where Lucy will ask him, "Hey, Charlie Brown, do you want to kick the football?" And Charlie Brown will be in his head thinking, "No, every single time I do this, she always pulls the football away at the last second, and then I fall flat on my back. I'm not going to do it." But eventually she talks him into doing it anyway. Lucy is kind of like that sinister voice in our head that reasons with us and convinces us that we should do it that way. So anyway, Charlie Brown then runs up to kick the football, and sure enough, as he thought would happen, she pulls the football away at the last second and he falls flat on his back. And he's left feeling kind of shameful about falling for that once again, even though he told himself he really shouldn't do that. So I've had this experience a lot of times in my life where I feel exactly like Charlie Brown does. And I imagine you may have felt that way one or two times in your life too. So that's why I wanted to talk about it today. And if you're still unsure what the heck I'm talking about, I'm going to give you an example from my life. So I used to have a friend that would blame me or anybody else in her life for anything that didn't go according to her plan. And it was a situation where I had to work with her in some capacity. And yeah, it was really frustrating to feel like she was blaming me for when things didn't work out. And at the same time, I am a creature of habit in terms of avoiding conflict. I really do not like conflict. I will find any way I possibly can to smooth things over, to maybe reason with somebody else, to maybe help them find another way of looking at it. And I just want to avoid the conflict. I don't like anger. I don't like, people feeling like people are angry at me. So anyway, I would just take on her blame or I would validate her if she was blaming somebody else. And I knew this was not a good pattern of behavior. It didn't feel good. It certainly didn't feel good to always take her blame all the time. And it didn't feel good to let her think that other people were at fault when I could see plainly that, she kind of had some responsibility in whatever happened as well. So anyway, in the short term, it was a lot easier for me to just take on that blame. But in the long term, it let her walk all over me or anybody else in her path. So this is an example of a pattern that I got into because of a past experience of mine. So growing up, I was the younger sibling, and any younger siblings out there might recognize this pattern where the older sibling would, blame the younger sibling for something, and, the younger sibling would just kind of have to take it because the older sibling is older and they have more words and they're stronger and all of those things. So, even though I knew I wasn't the one causing bad things to happen, she would say things like, "You made me feel blah, blah, blah." And of course I knew I wasn't making her feel anything. That was a feeling that she was making herself feel. Or, there were just all kinds of scenarios where I would get the blame for something when she should have been taking ownership for it. But I also knew that standing up to her really wasn't worth the storm and stress sometimes as well. And so that pattern of relating to my older sibling stayed with me as I grew up and forged new relationships in my life. They say that we have a tendency to work out our sibling relationship patterns with our friends as we grow up. And so that's what was happening with this one friend that I was talking about. It took a lot of self-examination and certainly courage for me to even recognize this old pattern of behavior and how it was playing out in my friendship. It took a lot also to acknowledge how that pattern was not serving me anymore. It was holding me back from really being myself. And there's Myra, my cat. It also took a lot of courage to make the decision not to let my friend blame me anymore and to really start to stand up to her and stand my ground. The result of standing up to her, I wish I could say that once I changed my pattern, that she was able to change her pattern and we could start to grow together in our relationship. But unfortunately, she didn't like the change of pattern and we ended up growing apart. Years later, though, she did apologize and she said that it taught her a really great lesson that she needed to learn, and she thanked me for standing up to her and showing her what she needed to see. So in the short term, I lost a friendship. And that was really hard. It was sad. But in the long term, I'll get it right. In the long term, I learned how to stand up for myself. And I ended up helping someone else eventually grow out of a pattern that wasn't serving her. And the outcome wasn't necessarily what I wanted, but it was definitely what was needed in that example. I believe that we all, at some point or another, experience these kinds of patterns or habits that we realize we need to change, but we also realize that saying we want to change our patterns feels a lot easier than actually doing it. We might start complaining about certain things always happening to us, and we talk the good talk about wanting to change, but when push comes to shove, we just keep making the same decisions over and over again. But when our words don't match our actions or vice versa, we can start to feel like we're not even in control of ourselves anymore. And then we start to lose trust in ourselves. So there are some things that we can do to start to change these patterns, even though it might seem like a really challenging endeavor. There are 3 questions related to changing patterns and habits that I want to tackle today. The first one is, how do we know we've outgrown a behavior, a pattern, a habit? And the second question is, what can we do to get unstuck from those patterns that are no longer serving us? And number 3, how can we measure our success in working on the patterns that we intend to change? Because success might not be an overnight thing. It might be a gradual thing. And it's really important to be able to measure how far you've come. So the first question, how do we know we've outgrown a habit or a pattern, or it's time to change? Well, the first way is to notice when you start to say things like, why does this always happen to me? Or why do I always end up feeling this way? Or I wish I would have, or I should have, fill in the blank. Another way is to pay attention to the messages from our bodies. Our bodies are always sending us messages. Sometimes we don't always listen to it. We can explain certain physical sensations away and not even notice what our bodies are trying to tell us. So for example, I noticed this past week that my body goes into a fight-flight response whenever certain people contact me. And, it's that typical, my heart starts pounding and I feel that knot in my stomach and my hands start to shake. Clearly my body is getting ready to defend itself whenever certain people contact me about something. And it's a defense pattern that my physical body has learned. Like I said, I don't like conflict. And so my body knows that too. And it lets me know when a conflict might be on the horizon. So another way to notice when it's time to get out of a pattern or habit is whether there are strong emotions that are popping up. Emotions are energy. They say energy in motion. But oftentimes that energy can get stuck or trapped in a certain place in your body, or it can just come up instantly on certain situations, like the frustration I have right now with my cat constantly meowing. But anyway, so for me, I might feel emotions pop up suddenly, and like for example, my emotional pattern is that I have a tendency to empathize greatly with other people. Whatever emotion they're feeling, I'm gonna feel too. Even though whatever's happening in their life is not what's happening in my life, but I can empathize with it, and so I can start to feel the emotions that the other person is feeling. It happened with my son recently, actually. He was feeling very anxious about starting high school, understandably. But as he was, expressing his anxiety and feeling his anxiety, I was starting to feel really anxious too. And me taking on that anxiety really was not serving either one of us in that moment. So as you can see, we really have to develop an awareness of how we might be habitually responding or reacting to life. So as you're looking for these patterns in your life, it's important to be gentle with yourself. These patterns took years maybe to develop. You practiced them a lot over and over again. They're ingrained in your muscle memory, your emotional memory, your thought memory. They're not going to go away overnight. So you have to understand that it's important to know about how these patterns operate. You have to know the mechanics of these patterns before you can actually change them or even start taking steps to change them. So the second question is, what can we do to get unstuck from these patterns once we recognize them? My favorite ritual for stopping a pattern is to mentally press the pause button. This creates mental and emotional space and physical time for us to actually observe what's going on in the moment. But it can be challenging a lot of times to press the pause button when a pattern pops up, because when that pattern pops up, we can oftentimes be really triggered. So it's important to start small when you're pressing the pause button in your life. Start by pressing the pause button just at random times throughout the day, even if you're having fun or nothing really particularly engaging is happening. Just remember to press that pause button. And when you do, notice every mental, emotional, and physical detail that you possibly can right then and there. What is happening in this moment right now? You're watching this video, for example. What are you doing, really? You're sitting, you're watching the video, you're hearing my cat meow. What do you see, hear, smell, taste, physically feel? Go through all of the senses and just notice, just observe what's actually happening in this moment. And then after practicing this for a while, then you can try to remember to press the pause button when you're doing something like watching TV or listening to somebody else speak. I like to press the pause button for my mental, emotional, physical state when I'm watching TV, especially if I'm watching like something very suspenseful or scary or intense. Because like I said, I'm a very empathetic person. I can really get caught up in things. It can be really overwhelming for me sometimes. But when I press the pause button when I'm watching something intense like that, I can observe what's actually happening, and I can start to de-intensify whatever I'm experiencing in that moment so that I'm not overwhelmed. I don't have to throw the blanket over my head and avoid watching certain scenes in a movie. So this can get you ready for pressing the pause button when you're actually feeling intense emotions or having intense thoughts in your actual life. So I like to use the TV as a way to get me ready for real life. It's like rehearsal. And eventually you're going to remember to press the pause button when you have a real pattern triggered in your life. And you want to remember to hold that pause button for as long as you possibly can in real life. Be really aware of what's happening. Practice saying things like, I know you want an answer to other people. I know you might want an answer from me right now, but I need to think on this a little bit, or I need a moment to process that, or I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. Can you give me a moment? Those are things that you can say if somebody is expecting an answer from you or expecting a response from you, but you might not be ready yet. You might want to hold that pause button for as long as possible. If you're not responding to somebody else and you're holding that pause button, try to calm yourself. Try to say things that are encouraging and gentle and compassionate to yourself in that moment. It's okay, honey. Some people like to use honey or sweetheart or darling, some kind of term of endearment for yourself. If that's too cheesy for you, then you can use something more neutral like dude. I don't know if you refer to yourself as dude, but that can be a thing. I don't know. You choose what works best for you. And then, during the pause, remember to notice exactly what's happening. Use all of your senses. Notice how you might want to react or respond, but then ask yourself if that's really the best way forward. Is that your best next best step? And then you can, if you have time, brainstorm some other ways that you could respond in that moment. And then try something new, If it doesn't work, it's okay, because then you have more information. It's also really important to release all expectations. Remember the story with my friend. If I had been set on my expectation of saving the friendship at all costs, I would have been really, really disappointed at the outcome, and I probably wouldn't have ended up with the outcome that I did end up with, which was the long-term benefit of helping myself and also helping my friend. You know, if you're choosing a new way of being or a new way of operating, you're not going to have any control over the outcome. You're not going to have any idea what the outcome is going to be. You know, we often engage in our patterns because there's some comfort in knowing, well, if I respond this way, this is probably what's going to happen. You know, that's comforting. Even if it's not necessarily the outcome you would really choose for yourself, at least you know what it would be. You know, better the devil you know than the one you don't, I guess. But ask yourself honestly, when you have responded in the way that you typically respond, did things always turn out the way you expected them to? You know, even if it wasn't going to be a great turnout, did everything line up and you predicted the future and it worked out that way? Chances are no. There are any number of variables that can happen. Sometimes as we get older, we engage in patterns that we think we're going to get an expected outcome and we never do, but we stay in the pattern anyway, a pattern that we might not like anymore. So why not try something new and release the expectation of any kind of specific outcome? So the third question is, how can we measure our success in working on the patterns that we intend to change? As a coach, I'm really big on celebrating victories, large and small. And one of the best measuring sticks for success in changing patterns is really observing what you've learned in the process of making the change. Self-knowledge is one of the most powerful tools known to mankind. When you know yourself, you own your power. So when life presents a scenario that triggers a potential pattern for you and you pause, whatever happens after the pause is going to bring you new information about yourself, about the other person, about life. So even if you respond in your typical way, you've learned once again that, oh yeah, that's right, that doesn't work for me. But if you respond in a new way and things go unexpectedly in a way that you deem negative, there's good information in that too, right? Now you know that if you do this, then that. But chances are really good that when you change a pattern in your life, you're going to be pleasantly surprised by any new way that you've behaved or responded to what life throws your way. So most importantly, let your measure of success take into account how kind and compassionate you are to yourself throughout the process. Because at the end of the day, if you are being a true ally to yourself, you really have nothing that you can possibly lose in the process of making that change. So I hope this message resonates with you. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm always so grateful for your presence whenever you watch these videos, and I love any feedback that you share with me. It really means a lot. It also means a lot to me if you like and or share these videos with anybody else in your life. The more likes and shares that I get, the more these videos get out there into the world, because our world operates in algorithms now. So if you would, please help me out with likes and shares and subscribes, anything that you feel like you can do, that would really mean a lot to me. You can stay tuned to any of my updates on Facebook or LinkedIn under my business name, Wings Unfolded. You can find me on Instagram under my name, Tess Miller. And you can find me on YouTube. I have a playlist called Growing in Uncertainty where you can find all these videos. Otherwise, just find me there by my name, Tess Miller. And check out my website, www.tess-miller.com, and you can see what else I have going on there. There's some free resources, and you can sign up for my weekly email list. So if there's something that you would like help with related to a life transition, feel free to send me a private message. I'd love to connect with you. And remember that it's okay to be stuck, but you don't have to stay there. Have an amazing week and take care.